Thanks, Robin. This is HLN Now. I'm Mike Galanos. We continue to grapple with the story we share. The death of a 22-month-old left in a car to die. His father charged with murder, and a funeral that has some asking questions.
Saturday, hundreds gathered in Alabama for little Cooper's funeral. The emotional service included the family's first public statements. Leanna Harris defended her husband during her child's eulogy.
I miss him with all my heart. Would I bring him back? No. To bring him back in this broken world would be selfish.
Okay, you just heard a reenactment there of what the mom, Leanna Harris, actually said at the funeral. That again has somebody some of us asking questions. And this is from reporters inside. There are no cameras allowed. But we are getting this firsthand information. We know the story, and there he is, her husband, Ross, little Cooper's father, charged with murder and his son's death. Ross Harris back in court Thursday. So there's one question. What are we going to hear then? As we know, the little guy was left in the car and he died. That was June 18th. Joining us, two very special guests here. Nick Valencia, my colleague from CNN. He was at that funeral. We'll hit on that and also looking forward to what we could hear on Thursday. Yeah. Also, Dr. Erik Fisher, Dr. E, a psychologist, to go over some of the things we're hearing. And let me just say this right out of the gate. We're not here to judge what people are saying at a funeral. But the fact is, this is something new, as we've covered stories like this, for a mom to go down that road. And we'll talk about that with Nick, who's at that funeral. But let's start with, what do we expect on Thursday? What more are we going to hear? Because you know the red flag. Internet searches about child deaths in cars from mom and dad. That has everybody asking questions. What more do you think we'll get on Thursday?
In the coming days, we'll see more search warrants dropped by the police. It's clear, Mike, that they have something more because the details, for as much paperwork as was released these past days by police there in Cobb County, there's not much detail that they have to go on. They have these two internet searches, two parents admitting that they'd searched in-car child deaths. But we don't know motive. We don't know the context to when those searches were done. Those questions remain to be unanswered. Police, though, they tell us those questions, a lot of them will be answered after this document dump. Could happen as early as Thursday, perhaps Friday.
Okay, so we'll wait on that, and you keep us posted on that. And I know you've done some digging. You've knocked on a lot of doors asking about what's Ross Harris like, I'm sure. What's Leanna Harris like? What'd you find?
What complicates it and what makes it so much more of a nuanced story is, of all the people that we spoke to there, in Tuscaloosa, in Northport, in Foster's, Alabama, no one had a bad thing to say about Ross Harris. Everyone stood up for his character. They talked about a God-centered man, a man with tremendous moral fiber. Yes, they do have the same questions as everyone else. Why would he have gone back to his car in the middle of the day? How could he have not seen his child after a 5-minute ride from breakfast to work? Those questions we don't have answers to. Ross Harris, we don't know how absent-minded he was. We don't know anything about his past, if there was problems in the marriage at all. We don't know any of these details. For all appearances, this was a happy family that could have made just a tragic mistake, according to their friends.
Got it. And again, well, let's get to the funeral. Dr. The subject matter gets people. When a mom says, and I'll read the quote, we heard it in that reenactment, she would not want to bring Cooper back into this selfish world. Not judging, but does it surprise you to hear that from a mom at her son's funeral?
Well, there's two ways to read that. The first way is that this is a mother who not only lost her son, she's losing her husband. And she sees people who are saying all these horrific things about her husband, potentially questioning her, and she sees how damaging this has been to her life, losing her son. The other side of that is potentially it's a side for motive that could be seen. Because if they saw this world as broken and they saw their son growing up in this broken world, to some degree they could say, well, maybe they felt like they didn't want to have a child in this world. However, she did talk about wanting to have children after this. But it sounds like somebody who feels very hurt, very bitter, very angry, and very alone and scared.
And I was there in that funeral, and what stood out to me, Mike, was that this should all have been about this little boy right here. It should have been about Cooper Harris. It wasn't. It was just as much about Cooper Harris' death as it was about the suspicious surrounding it, as it was about the father calling in. That moment, it was an extraordinary moment when that father called in. We had no idea, the reporters in the room. There was about a half dozen of us in there. I'm not sure if the majority of that crowd, the hundreds in that crowd in that church, had any idea that Ross Harris was going to call in from jail. He called in about 15 minutes in, and it was a very emotional moment. You could hear the sobs over the phone. He was given a standing ovation, unprovoked by the crowd.
Nobody asked for it.
No one asked for it. There was two standing ovations. One was asked by a family friend. He said, in theater, when actors do something well, you give them a standing ovation. Let's give Cooper Harris, a little boy, a standing ovation. Minutes later, Leanna Harris is giving the eulogy for her son. She says, Ross is a wonderful father. Ross is a leader of our family. At which point, people stood up in that church, started clapping for Ross Harris.
You know, there's a Facebook comment here. Many of you have commented on Facebook, and we'll take your calls on this in the next hour. Donna posted this. They didn't even talk much about the baby at the funeral, and what the mother said, no real mother would say what she said. Again, that's an opinion there. But do you concur with that not much was said about little Cooper?
There was a myriad of things covered. It wasn't just about Cooper Harris. She did go into a story saying the last 2 nights of his life that he had trouble sleeping. So he slept in between the parents the last 2 nights, and she says she'll remember that moment for the rest of her life. She also went on to talk about how she wanted more children. It wasn't a matter of if, but when she'll have more children. She also spoke about, Mike, the difficulty and how much it took to have a child and how he turned their world upside down, but it was in a good way. It was not an ordinary service, I'll tell you that. But, you know, how ordinary could it be when you have media present, when you open it up to the public? They were speaking beyond those in the crowd.
Right.
They knew that what was being said at that funeral would
Real quick, that changes things. When it isn't, like Nick's saying, it wasn't the intimate family funeral.
Right.
It was open to the public. Does that change things of how you react and what you might say?
Definitely, definitely. But I think also, how do you prepare for a funeral of a child? You know, that's not something you prepare for. It's not what you look at, how much time are we going to spend on Cooper, how much time are we going to spend on her. You can't prepare even for this whole event or situation. So to look at this and start to critique it as what's right or what's wrong, or, you know, I think, again, it's not about judgment, it's about evaluation. And we'll see how the testimony bears out and how the evidence bears out. But this, to me, seems like a horrific tragedy. And David Diamond, one of the op-eds you had on HLN, what a great article about how different areas of the brain hold different memories and how they function in memory and performance.
Okay, Dr. E, thank you. Nick, keep us posted. I know you will, and we'll wait to see